Anyhow, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the Lubar Center at Eckstein Hall, Marquette University Law School. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people we like to say are doing interesting and important work in this region and beyond. Today, we're talking about the Foxconn deal. This is the big deal with the Taiwanese electronics giant, Foxconn. Foxconn is going to open its first American plant in Mount Pleasant in Racine County. There is talk of thousands of new jobs being created. It's a very big idea and a big plan. As we also know, there are some people who have been critical of the Foxconn deal, who think there's too much in the way of public subsidization of this deal. So today we're going to talk about all of that. We'll talk about how the deal came to be. We'll talk about exactly what is contained in the deal. And we'll try to answer some of the questions that some of you in this room may have about it. So to help us do that today, we're going to be talking with one of the lead negotiators, one of the lead recruiters on the Foxconn deal. He is the Secretary of the Wisconsin Economic and Development Corporation. Won't you please welcome Mark Hogan to Marquette Law School.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Thank you.
So I want to work through a number of different areas in this discussion, and I want to begin by talking about what this deal contains and the scale of this deal. And so let's begin there, Secretary Hogan. How big a deal is this?
Well, just from the state's perspective, when we look at it, the $10 billion investment from the state, it dwarfs anything that has been done in the state before. A year ago at this time, we were talking to Haribo, the gummy bear manufacturer, about placing their first North American plant in Kenosha County. And at that time, that was a $250 million foreign direct investment. That would have been the largest foreign direct investment in the state's history.
$250 million.
And so now we're at $10 billion. 2 months later, we're talking about $10 billion. We're talking about state support of $2.85 billion over a 15-year period. There's the regional and the local support that's $700 million on top of that. And then, so the numbers are sometimes they're intimidating, Mike, to be honest about it. 20 million square foot facility, 15 facilities on a plant, several square miles, but about 20 million under roof. And 13,000 jobs for the state on a direct basis. When we look at the multiplier effect, the total jobs that could be, we believe, will be attributed to Foxconn just for the operation will be close to 35,000 jobs. And that doesn't include the construction, which will be at some point
10,000 or so?
Yeah, 10,000 plus another 6,000 indirect for the construction, which will take place over the next 5 years.
So when people say this is transformative, you obviously are one of those folks. You're one of the people who believes this will change Wisconsin in a profound way.
Yes. The fact that this is an industry, this is a process that is not being done anywhere other than in Asia. It's being done in Taiwan, Japan, Korea, and China. Nowhere else other than those 4 countries. And now it's going to be done here in the United States. It's going to be done in Wisconsin. And one of the reasons that Terry Go wants to bring this industry to the United States is this is their largest market. Between China and the United States, this is their largest market. And there are a lot of reasons for why they chose to come here, but just looking long-term where they want to be. They want to be where the demographics of their consumer base is going to be.
Let's talk about the products that will be made there, because I think people need to have an understanding of what they're talking about doing at this site in Racine County.
Yeah, this is the, it's the 10K 5G. It's the liquid crystal display. And these things will be used for anything from television sets. They'll be used in healthcare. They'll be used in aviation. They'll be used in autonomous vehicles when those come about. So there's a lot of use for it right now. I've seen different demonstrations of it, and the fact is that from a healthcare standpoint where surgeries are being performed, what a surgeon will see, what a doctor will see doing surgery is something that is 4 times better than what the naked eye can see. So that it kind of sets the pace for where this thing can go.
You mentioned that Foxconn directly, your anticipation is that they will create 13,000 jobs. Help us also better understand the kinds of jobs that are going to be created. Are these jobs that require college education, advanced degrees? Can people without a college education do these jobs? Tell us about that.
It's yes to all of that. I think one of the key strengths that we found when we were working with Foxconn is being able to use our technical college system, the 16 colleges throughout the state. It's 100 years old, and they have been meeting the needs of employers for years. And so a lot of the training that they'll be doing, there'll be technical aspects to the training, but Foxconn will do a lot of their own training. They will take groups of people from here after they have had certain level of training. It could be high school, it could be technical college, and certainly high school or college graduates. And they'll take those people, they'll take them, a certain group of them, to China, to Japan, train those so that they come back here, and they're training the trainers in China and Japan and coming back here. So in addition to the base level of education that we provide from a state perspective, they will also do a significant amount of training.
Average salaries, there's been a lot of talk about that. The number that I see mentioned a lot is about $54,000 a year.
Yeah, the starting salary is about $20 an hour. So that puts you in the low 40s, 40,000. But on average, the median is is pretty much where the average is too. So it's $53,875. We have that in our agreement with them, that they have to average those in order for them to be able to access credits from the state.
So in addition to what's happening in Mount Pleasant in Racine County, in the last week or so, we had this announcement that Foxconn also intends to purchase a 7-story building on Wisconsin Avenue, on the eastern part of Wisconsin Avenue, and open up offices there. What is the hope for that facility? What do they intend to do there?
That will be their corporate headquarters. Their U.S. headquarters will be the Foxconn place, as they call it. But it will also house, so it's a 7-story building. Northwestern Mutual is the current owner, and they'll be selling it to Foxconn. But there'll also be housing areas, incubators, accelerators, everything about their technology. They want to encourage that technology to grow in the United States. And when we talk about the Foxconn bonus and that building specifically being part of that, that's a big part of when we look at the dollars that the state is spending. This is something that we knew would happen, but there's no way to quantify the return to the state. So over a period of time, we will see a level of activity within that building and then really mushrooming out from that building. A lot of great things are being done in the state already, as you know, especially in this area. So it's really leveraging all of that and making it better.
Potentially how many people in that building?
I really haven't seen the numbers yet. I think the plan there is to first of all, they need to continue to build their corporate team. They're a little light on that. It's somewhat frustrating to some of us, but where Scott Neitzel, Secretary Neitzel, and I dealt with Alan Young and Louis Wu through the entire contracting phase, they also need to be hiring staff to help them build the infrastructure here, which they've done, and they've brought some really talented people in, and we're excited about what they're going to be able to do.
So that gives us a sense of what's being talked about right now. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on how this came to be. Why Wisconsin? How did this end up happening here? Stories I've read in the past said this all sort of began with what do they call it, a blind RFP, a request for proposals. That sounds so amazing when you talk about the extent of this project, but that's how it happened.
That's how it happened. We had been approached, the various regions had been approached about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that, looking for a certain amount of land. That's what happens. We work with site selectors. EY was the consultant that worked with Foxconn. So EY, who we work with on a lot of different projects, we worked with them on the Haribo project. They would come to us and say they need a certain amount of land. It's got to be, and here are the kind of the basics for it. So we respond to that. We send it out to the state people, the different regional economic development organizations, and they come back and they say, this is what we have. So that would have been January or February, and then we didn't hear anything until April 26th. We got a call at WEDC and from the White House saying that they wanted Governor Walker to be in DC either the next day or the day after to meet with this person from Taiwan who had met with the president that day. And coincidentally, we were going to be out there. I was going to be out there with my family. My son Pat, who you know, was out there at the time. And I said, well, I can take that meeting. I'm going to be there. I can meet with them on Friday. They came back on the next day, on Thursday, and said, well, I'm sure Mark's a nice guy, but they want to meet with the governor. So Governor Walker cleared his calendar. He flew out there, and he and I, along with Rich Zipper, his chief of staff, met with Terry Goh in Reince Priebus's office on April 28th. And then a week later, and that was a good meeting. It was a very good meeting. A week later, Alan Young.
Can you tell us anything about what was said at that meeting? What did the Foxconn representatives say to you folks?
Well, it was, so I listen a lot, obviously, when I'm with the governor, so I don't need to be talking, but it was trying to understand what Wisconsin had to offer from an industry standpoint. Terry's first visit to Wisconsin would have been 43 years ago when he was trying to sell the plastic knobs on TVs. And he had flown into the Twin Cities, and he drove from the Twin Cities down to Chicago. And his recollection, so the next time, he hadn't been in Wisconsin now for years, so his recollection of Wisconsin was what it was 40-some years ago on that. And obviously, there's a lot of open land between there and Chicago. So it was about that. I mean, the governor's pretty open about this, but for the first 20 minutes of the meeting, and we were in Reince Priebus's office, Terry actually thought he was talking to Reince Priebus. He didn't know he was talking to Governor Walker. And then when we got that straight, then things kind of took off. But so Alan Young and Louis Wu were both in that meeting. And the advantage we have, as we call it the Wisconsin connection, is Alan is a 1984 UW alum. And so Alan came up to me afterwards, and there was a lot of conversation, just kind of back and forth, but nothing definitive. And Alan said, I think what we need to do is we should have another meeting with the governor the following week. So he and I and Scott Neitzel, Rich Zipper, and the governor met in Madison at the governor's residence with Alan. And during that meeting, Alan said to the governor, Terry really liked that meeting. It went well. We'd like you to come to Japan. Now, this is the first week of May. And we'd like you to come and do a visit in Japan. And the governor said, great. Mark and I are going on a trade venture. We're going there in September. And we certainly would like to be able to do that. So, to make a long story a little longer, we walk out of that meeting, out of the breakfast, and Alan turns to me, and Rich and Scott Neitzel are there, and he said, I think we need to do it a little sooner. And I said, well, when are you thinking? And he said, how about next weekend? And so now I was really glad that Rich was there, because Rich, he knows the governor's schedule. I don't know what the governor's doing, but Rich does. And we were able to work it out. And within about a month later, the governor made that trip. And that really cemented it, because when the governor made that trip, he flew into Osaka, Japan, got off the plane, Terry met him, and the original plan was that they were going to give the group that went, I was not able to go, 3 or 4 hours at a hotel. Terry said, I want you to come to the plant. And Governor Walker said, that's why we're here. So, I mean, the team went there in the same clothes they had traveled. They said they were probably in the air as much as they were on the ground. So that kicked it off relative to the relationship of what Terry was looking for from a relationship standpoint.
So let me ask the questions that I'm sure you were asked. So I'm a Taiwanese electronics giant CEO, and I'm saying, where do I want to locate my facility? And I would say, well, Wisconsin, it's not the lowest tax state, certainly. Wisconsin doesn't have a ton of people with bachelor's degrees. We're talking about stuff that's down the road going to be pretty high tech. Does Wisconsin, they've got low unemployment. How many workers are going to be available to do this work? How did you answer those questions? Because I'm sure that was part of the discussion.
Absolutely. When they started with the formal RFP, and really when they were in Osaka, and every conversation I had with Alan and Lewis after that, it was about cost, it was about unnecessary delay, and it was about workforce. And we were able to assemble groups of people very early on in the process where we addressed each of those requirements. And that's one of the things I'm really proud of, the way the state worked together with their regional and local partners, because they were in the state then. So that was April 28th, we were in the White House. Within 2 weeks after that, we had 30-some people from China, Taiwan, and Japan down at Gateway in Kenosha. And we had probably 20 to 25 people from the state, some academic partners, some industry partners, economic partners from Rock County, from Kenosha, and Racine counties, because those were the three areas. And we were going to spend the next 2 days with this group of people. And what I'm really proud about was, I sat in the room, it was a room like this, and there were probably 50 people in the room, and I just said, look, this is a secret too good to keep. But you cannot go out of this room, you cannot talk about this, because it will just blow things up. And I said, if you feel that you need to go home and talk to somebody about it, your spouse or whoever it is, look around you. Now, there's 35, 40 people in this room that you can call and talk to about this. This is the group that needs to know. And I'm very proud of...
Did you tell your wife about it?
Not initially. She knew, but and it really is. It comes down to it's a secret too good to keep. And so, Mike, I think it's okay to tell you because you're my friend, and then you go and you tell somebody, and then all of a sudden, you got a lot of people knowing about it. And it wasn't until the president out in Waukesha in the middle of June, so a month later, where the president said, we were in a back room, which we were, just negotiating this deal, which may have been in a little, exaggerating just a little bit, but he was meeting with Lewis and Alan and the rest of us about this deal. And then it just kind of blossomed.
Were you surprised he sort of came out of,
No.
the president came out and said, hey, there might be some good news for Wisconsin? You weren't surprised by that?
But, and whatever you feel about President Trump, this Foxconn would not be in Wisconsin without President Trump being in his office. The way that he handled it, the way that he talked to Terry and said, you need to be here in the States. And Terry understood the political aspect of it, the cost aspect of it, the tariff side of it. No threats, but the president has been pretty clear about how he wanted manufacturing to be back in the United States.
So 2 quick questions, and then we'll get into some of the other questions about the deal. Why Mount Pleasant? Why was Mount Pleasant in Racine County the place?
A great piece of land. It hit all of the important things. Between Kenosha, Racine, Rock County, they all had land, but the proximity to Lake Michigan was important. The
water needs.
The proximity to the interstate is important. And I think it's just a combination of things. So cost, speed, workforce. Workforce could have been anywhere because there's Gateway, there's MATC here, there's Waukesha County Technical College, the universities like Marquette, UWM. All of these people were involved in this process, and they just felt like that was the right place to be. But in the end, Racine County and Mount Pleasant really wanted this.
And why not Ohio or Michigan? My understanding is Michigan made a different kind of offer, but in fact, in pure dollars, it might have been worth more than the offer that Wisconsin made.
I don't spend any time wondering why other people don't get things. I looked at it and said, we put our offer on the table. We thought this made sense for the state, and it does.
So how did you know that the number would be, as you said, just under $3 billion for the state's part of this deal, just under $1 billion for the local? Where did that number come from? How did you know that would be the number?
Well, we spent a lot of time on it. We have our own models. We had an economic analysis that was done by EY. We engaged Baker Tilly to do one on behalf of the state to kind of true up the results that were received by, that were presented by EY. And so you just kind of go through things, and we could say, okay, this is what we can do. And then there's the budgetary standpoint. From the budgetary side, We bring the state's budget office in. That was one of the reasons that part of our deal is normally on our tax credits, if somebody spends the money in a current year, you can file that with us, and then you get that money then. But the capital expenditures, for example, really pay out over the next 9 years, over a 7-year stream of payments over 9 years. And we looked at it and said, you know, at almost $200 million a year, the state budget could take that. But if you just did it in the 3 or 4 years where the bulk of it wouldn't be able to do that. But, you know, we knew where we could be. They knew where they wanted to be. And in the end, we just felt like $3 billion was the right number, and then we came away from that and gave them a sales tax exemption, which is worth about $150 million. So our contract is for $2.85 billion. But we felt that was right. I mean, we looked at it a lot of different ways, and with a lot of people within the budget office and the governor's office, and felt like that was the right thing to do.
I saw a story in the Journal-Sentinel about a week ago, a little over a week ago, and they said that the Foxconn deal is different than a lot of the deals that, for example, your organization has done in the last year, in the sense that it's about $8 times more per job than typical job creation deals. That's a big difference. Is that, well, I'll get your response to that. That is a big difference. You feel that's what it took, something less than that just would not have gotten the job done?
It would not have gotten the job done. And yet the $2.85 billion that the state put on the table was, we think, from over a 15-year period, reasonable, given the transformational nature of what we were doing. When you look at national things, whether it was a Boeing or a Tesla, we're very much in the same category from those dollars. It's significant. I'm not downplaying it. I talked before about, you know, the Haribo or a Quick Trip or people like that, what we're doing there, Generac, and then what we're doing here, $2.85 billion. Yeah, it is that much more. But the transformational nature of having this industry here in the United States, in Wisconsin, is something that you just cannot, it's mind-boggling, and I really believe that it's going to come to fruition.
And your response to critics, because you hear the critics, I mean...
we don't have critics.
Yeah. You know, Democratic candidates for governor are all saying this is going to mortgage the future of our state, that this will mean less money for highways, less money for education, less money for young Wisconsin companies, not foreign companies, but Wisconsin companies that could have used some help. What's your response to that?
I think we do a great job at the state level of balancing the priorities in the state. Whether it's from an education standpoint or the highway standpoint, more dollars are being invested there than ever before. And at some point, you have to make a decision. Do you want this in Wisconsin, or do you want this to go to Michigan or Ohio or someplace else and let some other state have this transformational opportunity? And early on, Governor Walker said, we want this in Wisconsin, and that was the direction. And you know, I feel very good about what we were able to negotiate with the company.
Let's talk about the terms of the negotiation and the terms of the contract. One of the big things that people asked was, what happens? Are we going to be out money if somehow Foxconn can't deliver on the promises being made? Is the state sufficiently protected?
Yes, I believe that we are. They don't get incentives until they spend the money, until they hire the people. There are minimums that they're required, minimum number of employees that they're full-time equivalents that they have to employ. It's got to be at that 53,875 average in order for them to qualify. There's a band, and it builds up over the period of the first 10 years, but to get to 13,000 jobs, and then there's a minimum that they have to have in order to qualify for any incentives at all. So, for example, when it's at 13,000 in year 10, I think the number is 10,400, which is 80% of the 13,000. If they don't have 10,400, if they have 10,000 jobs at that point, they get zero. They get zero. And yet, if they had 10,000 jobs, that would be a significant boon to the Wisconsin economy, because all of those 10,000 people, they're living here, they're paying taxes, and that's a revenue stream coming into the state. So we have downside protections, and then we have clawback protections, which are bolstered by Han High Precision, which is the Foxconn entity in Taiwan, publicly traded company. And then also Terry Go, putting his personal guarantee on the hook for 25% of the requirements that we have.
Let me ask you a very frank question. Did you feel that was necessary in part because of The fact that there have been a few instances where Foxconn has had big plans, and whether it's India or maybe whether it's Brazil or not so big in Pennsylvania, where they haven't lived up to what was discussed. Did you feel like you needed those sorts of guarantees just in case things didn't go as planned?
We have those guarantees in our contracts at WEDC. So whoever that is, I mean, those types of clawback provisions are included in all of our contracts. In the case of Foxconn, I was very vocal, Scott Neitzel, as we went through the legislative process. We talked about the fact that we were going to have Hanhai Precision, which is Foxconn, on the hook for this. We were going to negotiate that. They were going to be on the hook for this. Didn't guarantee what the amount would be, but we said they were going to be on the hook. And Hanhai is, it's the 26th, 27th largest company in the world, the 4th largest, right behind Amazon technology company. A significant company, billions of dollars on their balance sheet, billions of dollars. They make billions of dollars every year. And we felt it was necessary to have them on the hook. And as we went through that negotiating process, and not to get into the negotiating process, but they came back and they said, in order to offset perhaps the 100% for Hanhai, Terry's willing to put his personal guarantee on the line. I said, done. I mean, so it was them that offered that to us. And, in my banking world, I understand that when not everybody wants to put their personal guarantee on the line, but when they do, it really means it's a level of commitment that you cannot fully appreciate until you've worked with people on that basis.
Could the state have been any more insistent on workforce provisions? And by that, I mean, let's talk about the Bucks Arena right now. So you have, there are certain stipulations in that contract that the work will be done by X number of people who are underemployed or unemployed or from the surrounding area. Could that have been done in a deal like this where you said, well, we have to have X percentage of the employees be from the state of Wisconsin, we have to have X percent be underemployed or unemployed? Was that possible in this kind of deal?
No, and I'll tell you why, because neither Secretary Neitzel nor I felt that was, nor Governor Walker felt that was the way to go. And the reason behind that is, to me, it's pretty simple. When you enter a contract with somebody and you are putting performance requirements on them to spend the money to hire the people, and now all of a sudden you're putting something in there, I don't want them, I don't want, whether it's them or anybody else, coming back to me and saying, well, the only reason we couldn't hire these people is because you had this hiring requirement in there. And so let the free market work. I mean, there's thousands of jobs, thousands of opportunities for people to be employed here. I've been very vocal from day one on this. The opportunity for the under and unemployed in the city of Milwaukee is significant, and we are working on that. But to put that into the agreement and say you have to hire so many from this zip code, to us it just wasn't going to work.
Let's talk about I know one of the things that you said you were excited about was the potential to connect people in this community who need jobs with the jobs that are expected to come from Foxconn. The big issue here seems to me to be transportation. How do we connect those folks, some of whom don't have cars? Bus service is not something that goes readily between Mount Pleasant and parts of Milwaukee. How do you do that? What's being discussed, if you can share with us?
Yeah, let me just say is that we are working. We acknowledge that. We understand that. We know we need to be able to work with the company, and not just the company, but other employers that are in Racine County or Waukesha County or wherever they are, to be able to provide transportation to people that are in need of it, to be able to show up for a job. It's the Joseph Project, which I know you're familiar with. That has done an outstanding job of figuring out a way to do it on a much smaller basis.
Small scale. Yeah.
Small scale. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's in the end what you have to be able to do. You have to be able to show up with transportation available. I think the goal here is not to get so big with this thing, you don't want to get in the debate about regional transportation.
I was going to ask you, do we need a regional transit authority?
No, what we need is a way to get people from the city of Milwaukee or wherever they are, whether it's to Waukesha County, Racine, or Kenosha County, or down to Walworth County, or up to wherever the employment needs are. We need something to be able to do that. But as soon as people start talking about it and use it as an opportunity to say we need regional transportation, I think it just kind of falls on deaf ears, because let's get what we need to do. Let's get that done first, and then somebody else can talk about regional transportation. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I'm not really clear on that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I see that. But you think that could be, the workforce needs that transportation linkage, you think that can be done without government having to play a significant role?
I think government will have to play a role in that.
Role.
Yes. Yeah. I think we will, but again, we're working on it. Ray Allen, my counterpart at Department of Workforce Development, works closely with Employ Milwaukee here and the regional workforce boards, working on that and trying to figure out what's the right balance to find.
One of the questions you often hear asked about this project is, how will it benefit people who live in the northern third of the state? If you live in Ashland, or if you're living in Tomahawk, how am I going to benefit? This sounds like this is could be a sweet deal for people in southeastern Wisconsin, but it won't affect me one iota. What do you say to people who make that
Well, our commitment is, we have 72 counties in the state, and we want this to be a positive for all 72 counties. So we hired somebody. Part of the legislation was to give WEDC dollars to put somebody in this role. Yella Trask, who's from Madison, is in that role right now. She had worked with Nelson Schmidt here. She started in January, and it really is about the supply chain, about trying to connect, first of all, understanding what the company's needs are, and then going out and trying to figure out how do we accomplish that supply chain and expand it beyond southeastern Wisconsin. You know, it'll happen here, and we have to work at it very hard, but we are extremely committed to making that happen so that the opportunities are not just here in southeastern Wisconsin, but throughout the state. I use the example, I say, here's the state of Wisconsin, here's Highway 29, and we need to spend a lot of time north of Highway 29 to make sure that this works.
So I've heard the governor say, for example, I think there's an excavation firm from Black River Falls or something like that.
Hoffman,
you're saying that's going, we'll see more of that in the next couple of years as this facility is constructed? And
so there's a construction side, so that's Hoffman Construction, and they're doing some of the road work down there right now. So there's the construction angle, but then there's also the operating angle, and the key will be to understand the process, because it is new to the state. I mean, it's new to the United States, this industry, and to be able to understand what it is that their requirements are. I mean, there are some basics of things that they will need to buy in the state, but that can come from the state, but there's also the glass manufacturer, for example. They'll need to have a glass manufacturer in the enterprise zone, in the geographic, right with their facility running that. That's not being done in the United States, so that has to come here.
We're talking a little bit about transportation. Give us the latest on this interesting idea. Some of you probably read about this notion that there's going to be an autonomous, there's a lane that would be constructed down 94 for autonomous vehicles, so you wouldn't, driverless vehicles, which sounds
the Department of Transportation is way above my pay grade.
So,
but I think it's, and I've been in an autonomous vehicle. I was in United Arab Emirates last year, and we rode in one, and it really is, it's kind of an interesting experience.
Well, you're here.
Yeah, so I'm still here. Yeah.
Bodes well for the future, I guess. How about the workforce? This is something that we've talked a little bit about today, but you know, there are folks who say, well, these people should be from Wisconsin, the people who are hired at that plant. How practical is that? It doesn't seem like it would be terribly practical.
From a practical standpoint, trying to find the construction jobs, and that's one of the things that you'll see, and you'll see a website. The governor announced it yesterday, talking about within the Department of Administration, and we'll be going out and we'll be having 10 or 12 of these sessions throughout the state as they work through the construction team and bring their construction team on. They'll be going out and they'll having these conversations about workforce and also about the subcontractors and that type of thing. So that's the construction. But then on the operating side, again, these jobs will be built up over a period of time. So the goal is really to have a minimum of 5,000 people working there in 5 years and 10,000 in 10 years. But they also know that in order for them to access all of the credits, they need to get to 13,000 pretty quickly. But on that point, we want people to, the governor's done a great
I mean,
job.
everybody wants Wisconsin people to work there.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That's the goal, yeah.
And we have, and I think if you look at what Governor Walker has done with the programs that he's put in place relative to those that are, people that are coming out of correctional facilities, people that are on welfare, on receiving dollars from the state, and getting people that are capable of working and earning a paycheck and having programs that help those people get trained, get employed, and have a career, that's significant. So that, I mean, that's been going on for a few years when Governor first took office in 2011. But the work that we're doing with veterans, we're trying to attract veterans that are either coming out of the service. Wisconsin has the most benefits for veterans of any state in the United States. We have, I think there are 23 of their list of 20-some. The next has 21. And so we want veterans to come back here. But then it's about the people that, we've got 80 or 85,000 students that every year graduate into a job in the state, whether it's at the high school, technical college, or university level. And we keep about 60% of those. And our goal is to get that to 70%, to get it to 80%, and give those students that are graduating into the workforce an opportunity to work and have careers and work and play in the state that they've grown up in. That's a big part of it. We have just, the other thing there was a lot of stuff that we got hung up in the conversation about, all right, we have reciprocity with the Illinois people. We're paranoid that all these people from Illinois were going to come from Illinois to take these jobs. And when you look at the border states, the border companies, there's probably 10% of those companies that their employees come from Wisconsin. But we have every day, we have over 57,000 people that cross the border from Wisconsin to go into Illinois work. And we have about half that amount coming back. So I don't know what the reciprocity does or doesn't do, but I would love to give those 57,000 people that live in the state of Wisconsin an opportunity to work where they live.
Mm-hmm. Quick question about water. We saw the news that Foxconn says it'll need 7 million gallons of water a day to meet its needs. To put in perspective, Waukesha wants 10 million gallons a day. 7 million is far less than the municipalities near Lake Michigan are using right at this moment. So it doesn't sound as much like this is an issue of quantity, but quality is a bit more of an unknown. What will Foxconn be using in its production process? Does the Racine water treatment plant have the ability to deal with the materials that might be in that water? How do you assure people that water is something that is going to be protected in a very rigorous way?
Well, two things. One is that Racine County in that area has done a terrific job of assessing the requirements of the company and matching it up with the resources that they have. And they'll make the adjustment in order to be able to handle that. So from a quantity standpoint, I don't think that there's any issue there. From a quality standpoint, one of the things that attracted Terry Go to the state of Wisconsin was the environmental aspect of how important environmentalism is in the state. If it were up to Terry, not one drop of water that came out of the lake would leave the plant. And I don't think that that's realistic, but they have to follow all of the same rules and regulations that anybody else does that relative to water quality. And so we have rules and regulations in place. We didn't alter any of those. The only thing we altered was the wetland side of it. But every other thing, all of the permits, all of the things that they need to do, whether from a federal or state standpoint, they have to comply with.
You said 5,000 jobs within 5 years. Where do you expect to be at the end of the year in terms of jobs? Or what will that project look like by the end of the year?
I think that they'll have the requirement to gain credits for 2018, and they would be verified in 2019. The minimum is 250 jobs. Then the maximum would be 1,075 or something like that. So I think, I think we're going to be closer to the 1,000 than we are going to be to the 250.
Let me ask you a philosophical question, whether we've entered some brave new world. There was news recently that Kimberly-Clark, in paper business up in the Fox Valley, was going to close a couple of plants, maybe 600 plus jobs could be eliminated. The governor said very quickly that, we're going to offer the same sort of incentives, same sort of subsidies that we did for Foxconn to save those jobs in the Fox Valley. Is this a good long-term strategy, or are we going to start to see businesses right and left saying, we're out of here unless pay us some money?
Yeah, it's a tough call. And I think what it really came down to was doing nothing was not appropriate.
In the Fox Valley, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. The significance, Kimberly-Clark has been there for 146 years. The impact that they have, those 610 jobs have, not just for those 610 employees, because it's critical for each of those families, but the supply chain impact on for other employers in the area to be able to do that is they would be impacted by it. So doing nothing is really not an option, and I think you really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and say whether or not this is something that we want to do. So this morning, the legislators from the area put out the legislation for co-sponsorship, and we've sent a letter to Kimberly-Clark kind of outlining what that is. But it's a tough call, and you really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and look at all of the circumstances involved.
This is a different, I would assume you view this differently because of the legacy of the corporation there, because of the kinds of jobs, the supply chain jobs, different than what's happening in Wauwatosa with JCPenney, where they said we're going to close this distribution center, we're going to get rid of the call center, 670 jobs go to a couple of other cities.
Yeah, I think that one of the strengths of Wisconsin is the manufacturing legacy we have here, and the supply chain, the multiplier effect is significantly greater than it is on any other type of industry that we have, certainly on something like JCPenney, and that's not to downplay at all the impact that closing will have on those families.
I wanted to wrap up my part of this. We'll take some questions from the audience here in just a minute. But you mentioned the banking business. You were in the banking business for decades. Put into perspective for us what this experience has been like for you in your business career.
Well, it's
the Foxconn experience.
The Foxconn experience, none like it. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of negotiations, but the number of surreal moments in the Foxconn, outside of my family, the number of surreal moments that I've had with that opportunity, it pales. I mean, everything else pales in comparison. And I'd like to believe I've done a lot of really good things, in my banking career. But we sat in the governor's office on July 12th. July 11th was the date, and I remember that date because it was 40 years from that date that I walked into M&I Bank for the first time, and I had that brown polyester suit on and that bad tie. You remember those, Mike?
I do. I still have one.
Yeah. And it was 40 years ago that day, 7/11/77, that I had started my banking career. And we reached an agreement that night after meeting with the governor and several of his team members. Scott Neitzel and I, we went over to a hotel in Madison. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and we went with Louis Wu and Alan Young were there. And I said to them, this is, the governor wants us to ask you to give this number to Terry, $3 billion. This is what we can do. And that obviously there was significance in that, but what was even more significant was what Scott Neitzel said after that was right away, he said, hey, look, if this doesn't work, we're still friends, because we had developed that kind of a relationship. So the next morning, Louis and Alan come to my office. Scott is there, and I had given Louis a sheet of paper which kind of outlined what our proposal was, and just kind of did it on the back of the envelope, so we were all looking at it the same way. And he starts folding it up, and I'm thinking, we're friends. We're still going to be friends. That's what I'm glad Neitzel said that last night.
You're thinking they were just going, no, that's not the right number.
And what Louis said is, Terry wants to do business with Governor Walker. So the four of us have to figure out a way to get that done. And so we went over to the governor's office, and they signed one sheet of paper. And you talk about surreal moments, and people are critical of this. One sheet of paper, governor's letterhead, it said $10 billion, 13,000 jobs, $3 billion. Those were the three numbers that were on that sheet of paper. Terry signed it, the governor signed it. I've never been in a more powerful moment of witnessing something that is going to be transformational for the state.
And when you say transformational, the term that the governor's been using to describe this is Wisconsin Valley. Does this have the potential to be Silicon Valley-like, or is that just sort of
I don't want to be
dreaming?
anything like what's done in California. So let's do it the Wisconsin way. And I think that's what comes back to why I think that's why Foxconn's in Wisconsin.
Okay. Let's take some questions from the audience. Those of you who have attended in the past know that if you're in the seating bowl, you press down on that little button in front of you. It says push. Push down on it. Keep your finger down on it. Keep pushing, and we'll be able to hear your question. If you're in the back, Ryan is the gentleman with the microphone. He will come over to you. He will take your question. And all I ask, and as I do at every event that we do, is if you can just keep your questions brief. We'll get to as many as possible. And we're really not big fans of speeches. So if you can keep it fairly brief, we'll touch on as many as we can. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Let me start over here, and then we'll work our way back over the room.
When you quote the employment figures, are those all direct hires from Foxconn? I guess I'm thinking of tool makers, jigs and fixtures people, and things like the supportive services and little shops springing up all around this project. Has any of that been calculated?
The jobs, if I understand the correction, the jobs that they will receive the credits for have to be employees of Foxconn. But
other industries.
I can actually hear you better without the microphone.
The other industries that will have to support operation like this. And I'll say that again, jigs and fixtures and tool maker kind of professions. It's going to be astronomical.
It will be. That's the transformational nature of it.
Yeah. And just the maintenance people that they're going to need to keep these conveyors going and everything like that.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Incidentally, on that front, are we worried that at any point these jobs go to the way of robotics? I mean, let's face it, that's coming in a lot of industries. Are we worried about that?
No, because their process right now, they use a lot of robotics in it, but that's how you get to the higher value of the jobs from a dollar standpoint, because the requirements for people to work on robotics is greater, requires a greater wage. That's why you get to the $53,875, and they're very comfortable with that number. But yeah, I will be in China in April, and I'm going to tour one of their facilities. I'm looking forward to that. But they have millions of people, million-plus people in China that are, a lot of it is the assembly work, but they're building these plants in China as well.
Okay. Yes, sir. Hang on a second. We'll get you a microphone. Sorry, Ryan. I'm making you get a workout there. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to bring up the concern about jobs being automated away in the future. So that's already been discussed. But I have two other major concerns that haven't been raised. I tend to believe that Foxconn was attracted to Wisconsin because our current political environment makes it easy to roll back or get around environmental regulations. So I'd like you to comment on that. And also, with this huge amount of incentive per job for a foreign company, why has WEDC why have the Walker administration and WEDC not been working proactively with iconic Wisconsin companies like Kimberly-Clark instead of reacting to the news of job cuts? And why was no effort made to retain the 1,000 jobs that were lost at Oscar Mayer and Madison?
Well, okay, there's a couple of questions there. The environmental, I'll come back to what I said before. Every environmental regulation that's in place, other than the wetlands, that was the only thing that there was an alteration to. And I think the current requirement is you have to replace it with 1.25 acres for every acre you pull out. The legislation actually requires 2 times. And the other thing is the environmental impact statement. And again, it comes back to the fact that unnecessary delays was critical to their decision. And an environmental impact statement, I haven't been involved with one before, but they can take months, if not years. And we were not going to get this opportunity if that was in the way. And those are the two things. About Oscar Mayer, you know, we have conversations. It's not WEDC. We have a responsibility. We have a role that we play there, but we rely heavily on the local economic development people. They're the ones that know that. Whether it's the mayor, it's the economic development organization, whoever it is in those areas, they're the ones that need to have a pulse on what goes on in the community. It doesn't absolve us of what we view as our responsibility because we have an ongoing calling effort on people. But when it comes right down to it, Kraft made a decision on Oscar Mayer, and they didn't tell anybody about it. They didn't tell the governor about it, they didn't tell the mayor about it, and they made the announcement. And so they were going to take that to, they were going to take that to Iowa. You can't, if people don't want to return your phone call, you can't force them to return the phone call. And so some of these situations, as difficult as they are for all of the families involved in the communities and the legacy that an Oscar Mayer had in the state, the fact is that was the decision that was made from a corporate standpoint and something that government really doesn't have a spot to play.
On Kimberly Clark, were there any warning signs that was coming, the two plants could be closed?
No. Well, the warning sign came the week before where they said they were going to lay off a few thousand people, and 5,500, I think, was their number. And they were going to close 10 plants, but they didn't identify until the following week. But as soon as that first announcement came out, we were in contact with Kimberly Clark, and I've had several conversations with the company since then.
Okay. We'll go over here. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the three areas of consideration, the three possible sites. What was Milwaukee County and Milwaukee City's participation in the very initial conversations about potential sites?
Everybody hear the question? Okay, so we'll repeat it. The question was about the potential sites for the Foxconn project, and what, I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were curious about Milwaukee in particular.
What was their participation in the very initial conversation?
What was their participation in the initial part of the conversation, Milwaukee's participation?
You know, I really don't recall what their response was, but the fact that they needed they need over 1,200 acres for this facility, and if you look around Milwaukee County, you don't have many spots where there would be 1,200 acres. So really early on, the decision was made to focus on Rock County, Kenosha County, and Racine County on the part of the company. And that was as a result of the RFP that had been done before we knew anybody was going, who was behind the RFP.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? I'm going to see, let me go way in the back there, Ryan, because that's further for you to walk. And then he is working off his one.
Thank you. It looks like the predominant jobs that Foxconn will be offering at this 53-plus salary are fairly sophisticated and require a lot of training. What prevents Foxconn from bringing people from Asia to take these jobs? Because, gee, we got to get this thing started and up right from the beginning. So
Well,
what are the incentives, disincentives to prevent Foxconn from bringing in people from outside to fill these jobs?
Yeah. So it goes back to what I said before when Mike asked about why we didn't put employment type requirements of where people are going to come from, whether they come from Milwaukee or Green Bay or they come from the state of Illinois. We didn't feel that it was appropriate to put government in the way of forcing them to do something, understanding the significant number of people that were going to be required to be employed here. We think that's the way it works best, and I think it would be healthy if they had teams of people that came to Wisconsin to work here and help train the people that are here and going to stay here, and would even be better if those people decided to become Wisconsin residents.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I'll get over there.
Regardless of the pros or cons or the political atmosphere, just as a taxpayer, and this is a ballpark figure, so I don't want to embarrass myself on this, but if you look at 54,000 in the Wisconsin tax tables, I did this like 4 months ago, and this, just guessing here, is about $20,000 for the deduction, so it's $34,000 in income. And that turns out to be $2,150 per person paying taxes. That means if you have this 200 million every year, you would need 96,000 people to be paying taxes to get up just to the 200 million. That strikes me as incredible.
I come back to the transformational nature of it and the opportunity it provides. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau did their analysis. They said it was a 25-year payback. I think the fact that down the street, the company is making the decision to put their corporate headquarters here, which they will not be receiving dollars for from the state, that they're going to put accelerator and incubators in there, that will have a significant impact on the entrepreneurial environment in the state of Wisconsin. That's something that you can't identify when you do the calculation.
Yes, sir, down here.
You seem to have some insight into the process. Can you talk about why water is so important to Foxconn?
It's just, I think a big part of it is the glass piece of it, just the amount of cooling that's required and the use of water to cool. But I'm not, I'm a banker. I'm sorry, but I can't answer that. But I think it's the cooling, similar to printing companies. I think they have significant water usage as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
So a banker question.
I'm a former banker now. Yeah.
40 years. How would you ever collect on a guarantee by a foreign national and a foreign company?
I feel very good about it. I mean, we have excellent in-house counsel. We used Foley and Lardner, who represented us. We also had, and Foley and Lardner as part of their engagement, Julie Lee was the person that we worked with. She did a fabulous job for us. They went out and they retained counsel in Taiwan. And so when they're looking at it, they're looking at what the collectability of that is in Taiwan. So, I feel really good about the contract. I know nothing is 100% certain, but when I put my signature on that contract, I felt really good that the opportunity for the state was great. And if it didn't work out for whatever reason, we had the appropriate things in place in order to pull those dollars back, if we ever put them out.
I'll take just a couple more questions. I'll take one here.
Another viewpoint on transformational has to do greatly with this environmental situation. When we see daily in political releases that President Trump is giving consideration to privatizing lots of things that have been publicly held before. So might the transformation be a negative transformation that we're worried about environmentally?
Well, I appreciate your comment, but I just fundamentally don't agree with it. I think we're able to maintain the environmental nature of what we love in Wisconsin and be able to do this thing. I mean, manufacturing is 20% of what we do in this state. It's 20%. We employ almost 500,000 people in manufacturing in a state that takes very seriously the environmental impact that those manufacturers have on our state. And those manufacturers have only grown and become better over a long period of time. So I respect your opinion, but I just fundamentally disagree with it.
You've been so patient in the back. If you can keep it brief, well, this will be the final question. Yeah, you've kept your arm up there. I felt sorry for you. It was so long. So.
Thank you. Regarding the 13,000 jobs, and I'm wondering how many years do employees need to be maintained in those jobs in order to meet the criteria? I mean, if this is a 25-year plan, for payback, I'd like to see 25 years of 13,000 jobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, it builds up to that number, and in order for them to access the full $2.85 billion, they have to be at 13,000 jobs. I think it's in year 7 or year 8. And when we talk about jobs, that same person does not need to be in the job. It just, they need to fill the job and have that person in there at whatever the average salary is. The question that I got when we were going through this, well, after 15 years and we stopped paying this out, is Foxconn going to leave? And I thought you would spend, if you're going to spend $10 billion and you were going to spend, the payroll a year is $700 million a year over a period of out to 15 years, this company is not going to go away in that 16th year. Because at that point, we're going to see how successful this is in the first 3 to 4 to 5 years, and we won't have to wait for that period of time. So I understand what you're saying, but I just think reasonableness would look at it and say they're not going to turn the lights out as soon as we stop paying them the credits.
Thanks for your question and your endurance. I appreciate that. Yeah. We're going to wrap things up there. Before I go, a couple of things that are coming up here at the law school. Next Tuesday, we still have a few seats available for Stephen Olacara. Stephen is the head of a group called the Millennial Action Project. This is a group that's trying to bridge our partisan divide. It's Washington-based, although he's a Brookfield native and a University of Wisconsin grad. He'll talk about why they're trying to bring people together, younger folks together, because those who aren't so young, they just gave up on that. So, but he'll be great. We do have a few seats available for that, so you're all welcome to that. And then on Thursday, I think we're pretty full on that one. We'll be talking with Lilith Fowler. She is the executive director of the Milwaukee Harbor District. Big plans. That will be the next big area for development in the city of Milwaukee. We'll talk about the plan, what they're trying to do, that marriage of economic interests and environmental interests. It should be a really good discussion. I mentioned both of those. You can also watch them on our feed at the law school, law.marquette.edu. You can watch them as they happen. So continue to check the website. We have some more really good events coming up that we'll be adding to the calendar very soon. Again, before you go, thank you very much for your interest, your attention, your time today, and thanks to Mark Hogan, Secretary of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Thank you.